Uh, it's almost good afternoon, but it's still there. Good morning still continues to exist. And from there, we can get hope that the morning will continue to be pleasant. But we have with us some changes, and as far as I can see, there have been changes in the persons and the names of the persons who will be participating in this exercise. It's my great honor and pleasure to be able to request Professor Imtiaz to be the first speaker, as mentioned in the catalogue, and for him to deliver his wise views on this matter. Thank you very much, Imtiaz.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Zamir, the chair, my fellow panelists, and a good number of friends out there. Well, the topic that I'm going to speak, particularly, this is a session on evidence. This is something that we do quite regularly now, and it's micro-narratives. I'll try to explain a little bit of what micro-narratives is all about, and then we will get into the case study, the Rohingyas in Cox's Bazar. And the micro-narratives were collected by members from ActionAid, particularly, who were trained by me, I guess, 3 months back. And they have started collecting. The stories are flowing. And I'll try to give an understanding of what this is about and why we need to have micro-narratives when it comes to refugees. It starts with a debate in order to understand the philosophical foundation of micro-narratives. This is a debate way back in 1930 between a physicist and a poet, both Nobel laureates, and they were debating a very simple question with profound implications. And the question was, can there be truth? Can there be beauty? Can there be table? And by implication, the moon without human beings? Tagore, who is supposed to be a mystic poet, came out with an emphatic no. No human beings, no beauty, no truth, no table, and by implication, not even the moon. Einstein, a physicist, and as a scientist, he believed in objective reality independent of human consciousness, understood beauty very quickly, because we really don't know how one cow looks at another cow, or a cow says in the morning, oh, you're looking beautiful, and the cow says, hamba. We really don't know. So, if there's a beauty, then it has to be human beings. Only human beings can make a graveyard like Taj Mahal and make it beautiful. A lot of people in the West think that there are a lot of other things in the Taj Mahal. It's only two persons' graveyard. So I always tell my students that why don't you go to some of these local graveyards and take romantic picture. Only the Mughals probably could do that. Make death beautiful. So you need humans. On the question of truth, he raised caution, and then Tagore answered, no, only through human beings truth is realized. A mosquito is not going to come and tell me, Prof, you are wrong. It's only human beings can say that this is right or this is wrong. And the debate went on, and at the very end, Einstein almost resigned and said something very interesting. He was telling Tagore, and let me quote Einstein, he said, I think I am more religious than you are, full stop. Now that tells you that Einstein probably was totally at loss with this particular debate. Now, Tagore got this not from quantum mechanics, as who are familiar with quantum mechanics would know that you need humans in order to say whether it's a wave or a particle. Whether the time is a wave or a time is particle, you need the human intervention. But it was long before quantum mechanics, not that Tagore was getting into understanding of quantum mechanics. But Tagore did not get from quantum mechanics. He got the idea from the Bauls of Bengal. The Bauls of Bengal always had this idea that the God is inside human being and not outside. And all the music and the songs and the lyrics that they have always, celebrate the divine inside human beings and not outside. Now, this debate has profound implication. What it means that without human beings, we don't have Dhaka University. We don't have this conference room. No human beings. No India, no Bangladesh, no China, nothing. Now, if that is the case, we need to invest in human beings because they are the only ones who can transform the future. No other beings does it the way humans does it. If you look at time, which is past, present, and future, we cannot change past. We can reinterpret, redefine, redesign, revisit time, past, but we cannot change. Present also we can't do much, and that's precisely the reason why Heidegger and Derrida, the post-structuralist, is to write present by crossing it. Because the moment you say present, you're already in past. The only thing that we have in our hands is future. And humans are extraordinary in that sense that they will design the future, they will design something and then implement it. We don't see other beings doing that. Bees can make extraordinary houses, bees, the architecture that they have, but they don't, write or put that in a pencil, in a paper, and then they don't do it. They do it almost instantly. Only human beings design it, model it, and then they, do the thing. So future is the only thing that we have in our hand. And that tells you that what you need to do is to make the person the center, each and every human being the center. And it doesn't matter whether you are empowered or disempowered, each and every person has some inherent political rights, they have some inherent economic rights, ecological rights, psychological rights, and you can go on and on. Each and every person is inherently unique. Now that's the philosophical foundation. Now when it comes to epistemology, where do humans get their sources of knowledge, epistemology? There are a series of, and one could easily identify 6 of them: perception, reason, introspection, memory, testimony, and of course, imagination. Don't forget Einstein's famous statement, imagination is more important than knowledge. So out of all the 5 categories that we have, imagination is the critical one. Now, other beings probably will use one or the other. Memory maybe, but not necessarily testimony. Perception, introspection maybe some of the beings. But only human beings do all these 6 things together. And that's the unique part. And that's precisely the reason that it is impossible to say who would be the next Hitler or who would be the next Einstein. He or she can be anywhere, at any place, at any moment of time. And I'll come back to that maybe during the Q&A to explain further if that is required. Now, when we talk about the knowledge and the processes and all, in terms of evidence, one can identify 3 kinds of narratives. And in yesterday and today, we have heard some of those narratives, but one can literally put them into 3 categories. The first category is grand or macro narrative, and we are familiar with that. Much of last session that we had, when Tapan Bose was talking about India and China and USA, this is macro narratives. And one can see its usefulness is very important, no doubt about it. One should not ignore macro narratives, and there's overwhelming structure. In the macro narratives, you will have an ideal kind of end state, and these two pictures that we have also give a sense of what macro narratives is all about, and then of course the path of how you reach that stage. In the first picture, if there's a highway from India to Thailand, and immediately you can see Narendra Modi and Aung San Suu Kyi. On the other one, you can see the highway from China to Myanmar, where you have Xi Jinping and Aung San Suu Kyi. Grand narratives, macro narratives are very important. We cannot do away with that, but that's only part of it. You are not going to get much of what we understand, or when we say the plight of the refugees or the trauma and all those things, you're not going to get that in this macro narratives. There is something called meta-narratives or local narratives. These are multiple narratives within the overall narrative, and you can actually limit them to some actors and groups in specific locations. If you're looking into Myanmar, you can focus Rakhine and another state and Khin, you can do that. And similarly in Bangladesh case also, Cox's Bazar or Dhaka, these would be the meta-narratives. They are part of a bigger multiple narratives, but one can focus. But what we are interested in today is micro narratives. Now in micro narratives, research hypotheses do not play a major role. You do not have to go to collect life stories or micro narratives with a hypothesis. You just go and collect stories. And these are living stories. You train, it's good to have young people because the story collector and the storyteller, they must have a bonding. And if you have a young person to go and sit down with a storyteller, the chances are the storyteller will open up more. If a professor goes or if someone high official goes, definitely there will be some inhibition and some censorship. And I can say with my experience with micro narratives for many years. So it's good to train young people to go and sit down and start collecting life stories. You don't have to have any hypothesis. It doesn't matter whether you collect 200 or 300, you collect as many as possible. Now in Singapore, they do it with apps, particularly those who are into fashion design, and immediately they can cluster them, and I'll come back to that, how you cluster them to see what is really happening. So it doesn't matter whether the stories, you've collected 200, but some amount of stories so that you can actually go back and see what is happening. What is more important is the appearance of a cluster. And then it's possible to go deeper into deeper analysis using the layers of clusters by adding variables, demographic characteristics of the storytellers, the emotional background of stories, and it goes on and on. The tool allows you to dive deep into the cluster and catch the specific history, thus merging the statistics and personal experience. So you're not going to throw away the statistics that you're getting from other sources. The literature review and all those are important, but you are getting a living person to say certain things. And then after you get all these stories, more the better, then you sit down and you start clustering them. You look at the commonalities and you look at the exceptionalities. It's important that you have at that stage not those who have collected the stories, but persons who have what you call, I wouldn't say insight, but who are well qualified, well-read would be something very important, knowledgeable enough. So when you read the stories, you can say, wow, this is coming up from a living person's, life. Micronarratives are similar but dissimilar also from oral history. In oral history, you privilege the person, so you know that in order to know, to give an example, if I want to know partition history of South Asia, I will go to Tapun Bosch and say, Tapunda, I want to, get your life, and that would be oral history. You are already privileged person, you know that. But in micronarratives, it can be anyone. It can be a rickshaw puller, it can be a doctor, it can be someone who is serving in an international organization, it can be a musician, anyone in that locality, it really doesn't matter. And then more the diversity, more diversified your storytellers, the better. So this is, you're not privileging the person, but there is some similarity. The story collector should be a good listener, which can be a problematic in South Asia because we are oral people. We talk more than we write, and we are not good listeners in many respects. That's a cultural issue. But here in micronarratives, you have to reverse your role. You have to be a good listener, and you have to have the patience to listen to ours, because sometimes the story collector might go in a direction, way out of what you really want, but you have to have the patience to listen and then maybe bring him by asking something without disturbing his understanding. You should not be the privileged person. It's not a Q&A, it's not an interview, it's something listening to person's life. Making best of speaker subjectivity. This picture is, this is a Rohingya picture, and you can see the subjectivity is important, not only of the mother and the child, but also the people who are looking around. You need to focus on subjectivity. What happens in macro narrative or grand narrative and the meta narrative, the subjectivity is thrown out. You say, well, you have to be objective. But in micro narrative, you say, no, you be subjective. You see the emotion, you see the tears, you see the pain, and you write down the pain. That's the point. You don't throw away. And this will not come out in surveys, and that's the reason why survey is not something that one should, particularly in trying to understand refugee issues or issues of trauma or marginalization. One should not, go for survey, numerical survey. By numbering people, you absolutely create a different kind of issues altogether. Oral sources are flexible, while written sources are not. Once you write, that becomes final, whereas orality has this, flexibility. And that's the reason, historically, the fatwas were always oral. The fatwas were never written. And there's an interesting story when one of the founders of Hanafi school, Imam Abu Hanifa, when his students, Yusuf, was writing down, Imam Abu Hanifa said, Yusuf, do not write what I am saying, because what I am saying today, I may not agree tomorrow, and what I will say tomorrow, I may not agree day after. That's quote unquote Imam Hanifa. So the fatwas were actually oral. It's only during the colonial British time. Well, towards the end, in fact, Aurangzeb started, he was the first to codify, and one can easily understand why he did that. That was the first one, but after Aurangzeb, when British came with the textual civilization, they started writing fatwas, and that created a serious problem that we are even facing today. So here you keep the oral civilization alive. Orality is something. So in the micro narratives, particularly in the context of South Asia, which lacks textuality, textual civilization, and not to mention whole Rohingya community are oral. It's absolutely oral. There's no evidence, there's no documentation, there's nothing, you're not going to get anything from there. It's all oral, and it becomes very important when you use this particular method. Time is critical. I don't have to, go on explaining that. There is a serious impact of digital technology. Now that you have apps and all, whether the person would be comfortable in talking as you're recording. Some would not. And you have to, give all those information before you start collecting the life stories. There is a limitation when translating the original meaning, saying the language. Well, with the Rohingyas, myself, I had serious problem because I don't understand the language at all. So I had to rely on my young researchers. So in translation, everything gets lost. Translation has really made the world very problematic. Even this concept called religion, when it got translated, the South Asian word is dharma. Dharma and religion etymologically are absolutely, different. Even river, and the South Asian word is nodi. River and nodi are not etymologically, they're totally different. But we use them and we create all those problems. We can come back to translation later on if required. Now, this is in rough what micronarratives is all about, and very quickly, let's go to the case study of Rohingyas. What do you get? So the stories that were collected out of 30 or 40 that I got so far, reading them, and I was not sitting down with them. This was collected by, as I said, young researchers, and they were writing faithfully what they heard. So you sit down and you then figure out. Well, the first you see is resilience, enormous resilience. Now, my intro to Rohingya resilience is also very interesting. I think it was in January, Farah probably would know, because ActionAid took me there to the Rohingya camps. And I went to the camp, and this is the lady, I was trying to tell the researchers, okay, let's go to one of those camps and sit down and see, how do you collect life stories? So we went and sat down, and started talking. We had someone who could translate what she was saying. But I was amazed. This lady, this woman, 5 or 6 times, were telling, can I get you a cup of tea? Even she mentioned once biscuit, which I could understand. She was thinking that she should offer some tea to us, even in that condition. She is a wife of a Majhi. Her husband was not there, and she had nothing whatsoever. And she was trying to tell, the person, give some tea, bring some tea, let me offer you some tea. And immediately I could see civilization. And something that Tapunda said today, that they don't want violence. And I'll come back to that, why, violence is not something that is culturally, not part of the Rohingya community. And the reason is simple, that resilience comes from the very fact that the Rohingyas are family-centric. Stories after stories they are saying about the husband, the child, the children, mother, all through the stories. It's 3 minutes? Okay, I'll finish 3 minutes. So, and then that tells you that you need to see this resilience and understand why Rohingyas are so resilient, and why, though they were suppressed for hundreds of years, but have not come up with any violent kind of a structure up until now. Very quickly, the other issue that comes in the stories is faith, and I think Pope Francis made a remarkable statement, when it comes to faith, and that why the Buddhist majority and military, is so against you know, the Rohingyas, because basically they're not allowing them to you know, continue with their faith. That comes very quickly. You can see it's highly religious people, and all will say, yes, I learned Quran, you know, I have to pray now, you know. Throughout the discussion, stories after stories, you get that. Marginalization comes very quickly. Poverty, I don't have to, you know, go into that. Government policy, the repression and all, continuously they're referring to that, how they were brutally suppressed, you know, all the permissions that they need. The third one would be the educational deficit. Throughout the stories, the 30 so stories that I have, none of them went beyond class 8 or 9 at the most. And that tells you. And then even if it is school, it is mainly madrasa school, learning Arabic. No learning of what you call Burman language, no learning of English. So I don't know how they are going to communicate, you know, because the Buddhist Vegetarian, they don't understand Arabic. So you can easily see linguistically they got isolated. And one can easily talk about ethnic cleansing, because if you look at the history, the well-off, the rich, the educated were, you know, left Myanmar before, long back, and some of them you will find in Bangladesh, in Saudi Arabia, in Malaysia, of course in UK, in many places, and the bulk of them, those who are disempowered and marginalized, they are the ones who live in the Arakan. The fourth one is the genocidal act, the rape, time and again. There's the issue of pregnancy and large families. You know, they want to remain pregnant because that's the only way that the military will not come and take them away. And that comes very clearly. I don't know how you're going to put that, you know, so everybody says, oh, they have 5 or 6 children. The reason they have 5 or 6 children is mainly because they want to remain pregnant all through, largely because the Myanmar military would come and take them away if they are not pregnant. Finally, of course, the issue of resistance is coming up, but interestingly, it's coming up not so much in the Arakan as much from the diaspora. And this is something that one has to look. Last one is the dystopia of the statelessness. And this particular statement by Shukina Khatun, she's just 35, will give you a sense. And this is what she's trying to say. The kind of situation we were in, we could not even master the audacity to dream. We did not know what the future held for us. Even the sound of coconuts falling from the trees was terrifying, as any loud sound resembled gunshots for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Imtiaz. I'm sorry I had to cut you short, but you know we're running out of time. The next person who will be enlightening us is Mr. Khin. He's the president of the Burmese Rohingya Organization, United Kingdom, and he'll be speaking on the question of how the international community can help overcome the history of systematic destruction of the Rohingya community. I've already requested Mr. Khin that instead of 20 minutes, he has 15 minutes, so that we can save some time and we'll have a time for asking questions. Thank you very much.
Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to speak at this conference today. I would like to express many thanks to the organizers for this timely conference. I am a Rohingya, born and brought up in Arakan State, western part of Burma, and I left when I was about 17 years. My grandfather was a member of parliament during democratic period time in Burma. My mother's grandfather was the first judge in northern Arakan. Today, I'm not a citizen of Burma. I would like to bring you to your attention a bit historical background and historical persecution of the Rohingya people and what can be done. The Rohingya people, they are living in Arakan state, western part of Burma, time immemorial. Their population is about 3.5 million. Today, only approximately about 500,000 Rohingya left in Burma. Because of continued persecution since 1948, 3 million Rohingya population fled from Burma. We have our own culture and civilization. During democratic period time, Rohingya were recognized as an ethnic group like other nationalities of Burma. On that time, one Rohingya MP was parliament minister. My grandfather was a member of parliament. There are many MPs. On that time, Rohingya language was broadcasted from Burma radio broadcasting program 3 times a week. This is from 1960 until 1962. Rohingya Student Union was there. Today, Burmese government is denying Rohingya not exist. I'm not exist. Like me, 3.5 million Rohingya population not exist. That is what Burmese government is denying. So when 1962, General Nguyen coup power, first he stripped up our ethnic rights. He stopped radio broadcasting program. He stopped cultural program where Rohingya participated with other ethnic groups of Burma. And he stepped up 1978 King Dragon operation where Rohingya NRC card been seized away and arrested Rohingya intellectual and influential leaders. In 1978, 250,000 approximately Rohingya fled from Burma to Bangladesh. Because of international pressure, on that time, Rohingya were repatriated back to Burma, not as a citizen, as a stateless Rohingya back to Burma. And General Nguyen, he designed 1982 citizenship law to take away Rohingya citizenship. Because of that law, today I'm not a citizen of Burma. That law deprived basic fundamental rights of the Rohingya. Because of that law today, millions of Rohingyas are not citizens. Because of that law, Rohingya were not able to go to universities. Rohingya, they can't walk, they can't move from one village to another. Even though my father served more than 20 years in government service, I'm not a citizen because of that law. I'm lucky here to speak to all of you today, but like me, many Rohingyas, they couldn't go to study, they couldn't move from one village to another. That is what the situation. You know, when I was in Arakan state, I was not able to move from one village to another. Like from Dhaka to Chittagong, if we need to go, we need to get a pass. It takes like 2 to 3 days. Even though your father, your grandfather is serious illness facing in hospital, you need to get a pass. Many Rohingyas, my friends, when I was in Arakan state, they could not see any of their, they could not join funerals when their loved ones been passed away. Myself, I couldn't go to the university in Burma. Thousands of Rohingya students, they couldn't go to the university and their life been destroyed. If Rohingya, they want to get married, they need to get a pass. When I was in Arakan, many of my friends been arrested because they could not wait 2 to 3 years for permission from government authorities. And they sentenced to jail 5 to 7 years because they married without permission. And UN Special Reporter, former UN Special Reporter Thomas Cantana report in 2010, he mentioned in Buthidaung jail, many prisoners he found those are alleged of they married secretly. That is what's been going on to our Rohingya people many years. So I want to bring you to your attention like 2010, where so-called reform, I should say it, so-called reforms came in Burma after 2010. Anti-Rohingya campaign was spread up everywhere. Anti-Rohingya seminars, meetings been held in every cities, Rangoon, Naypyidaw, Sittwe, and many towns of the Burma. As a result of this hate speech, in 2012, we have seen a state-organized violence where 140,000 Rohingya become IDPs in Sittwe, central part of Rakhine. And we have seen, after this violence, former President Thein Sein, he mentioned to current UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres, he was that time UN High Commissioner. These Rohingya, they are not citizens of Burma. The only solution, they are illegal immigrants. The only solution for these people is putting them in the camps and sending them to the third countries. That is what the military strategy and systematically what they're trying to do we are seeing now. Even though we've been facing this so much horrific situation in Rakhine State, international community been praising up global, praising that democracy and coming to Burma, and a lot of praise gone to those military-backed, USDP government on that time. We have seen in 2014 census, Rohingya were excluded, where international community supported. In 2015, the historic election, Rohingya were not able to vote and no right to be a member of parliament. The first time in a Rohingya history, we couldn't vote in 2015 election since 1938. After Aung San Suu Kyi came to power, we had high expectation on her. Rohingya been supported her for 20 years. Myself, I campaigned for her release and other political prisoners in Burma more than 10 years. We supported Commission of Inquiry, which was supported by NLD. And we, Rohingya, been worked through human rights and democracy development in Burma with exile. But when she came to power, she ignored and she denied Rohingya existence. We have seen in 2016 when ARSA attacks to police posts, and it's fake news, where I was visited to the camps. I have interviewed many testimonies. These Rohingya women, they told how military been raped them and how slaughtered Rohingya men, women, and children. And a state consular office, she mentioned that these are fake. Where UN, a special reporter mentioned, it's amount to crime against humanity. And many people may think that she does not have power, but she has power to deny these atrocities. She has power to defend the military, what's happening to Rohingyas. And after 2017, this is the largest crisis we have ever seen. First, they strip up our ethnic rights, and then the citizenship right, and then they impose restriction on movement, restriction on marriage, restriction on education, confiscation of lands, and then anti-Rohingya campaign, popular violence they created, and the Rohingya become IDPs. And finally, what's happening is the only thing in 2015 election, our rights of political been taken away. So we lost everything. We had one thing until 2017 August. The only thing we own our land. Even though they taken away all of our rights, we own our lands. And finally, what's happened after 2017 August? They burned down systematically all Rohingya villages and push us to Bangladesh. That is Burmese military systematic plan to destroy our community with intention, what we call is a genocide. Burmese military and government is practicing. So my dear friends, this is time. We've been suffering for many years. I really appreciate this timely conference. Again, I would like to express, it's been going many years. There is blanket impunity, crime against perpetrated against our people. It is time we must support ICC referral to this Burmese military. And whoever complicit in this genocide against Rohingya. And it is time also we need to focus, as far as what we have seen, the repatriation will not take place. They bulldoze our villages now. And I received last 3 days ago one message that my grandfather's village, one person told me nearby my grandfather's village, a few villages, even if you go back now, after how many months, 6 months, these refugees, they will not recognize. They erase historical presence of Rohingya. So where these people will go? Nobody will return to prison camps. And I met Rohingya refugees. They told me, one man, we are a manageable minority. We have our own lands. One man, he told me, he owned like about $150,000 worth land. And he told me, I'm not going to return, even though I left that. There is no safety, no security. He has seen with his own eyes, 7 years old boy was knifed to death by the military when they entered the village. There are many stories I heard when I was in the camps. I spent 4 weeks when exodus happening in September to October. So, as far as what we can see, it's very hard to see Burmese government is denying and everything. Unfortunately, we have seen Security Council have sat down 3 times. Russia, China is blocking. So, and same time they are bulldozing our villages, and same time they are building up prison camps for the Rohingyas. So it's hard to say. We don't know how long will it take to return. This is important. We need to focus the Rohingya leaders and Rohingya activists in exile and Rohingya refugees. We must empower the Rohingya people when we also same time focus on humanitarian access. And also, I would like to, yes, I would like to point out here, we Rohingyas are demanding, in this case, protected return to protected homeland. Why protected homeland of Myanmar? I want to highlight here, because we are not demanding separate state. We are not demanding anything separate. We are a part of Burmese society. My grandfathers, our fathers, been contributed for our country. We want to live peacefully in Burma, but as a whole Burma, NLD government, USDP government, military, security force, and Rakhine Buddhists, they do not want to see Rohingya as a citizen of Burma. Nobody wants to see these people are human beings even. They do not want to see Rohingya in Burma. So anytime when these people return, they can face mass atrocities again. So that's why we need protected homeland, protected return to protected homeland of Myanmar. And finally, I would like to express many thanks to Bangladesh government and the people of Bangladesh who have supported, who shown generosity and, hospitality where these victims of genocide fled from Burma. Again, I would like to express many thanks to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khin. It was a very revealing discussion on your part, and I'm sure it will lead to questions subsequently on various aspects of what you have mentioned. May I now request Ms. Divita Shandilya, Program Coordinator, South Solidarity Initiative of ActionAid, to please make a statement on Women Speak, a Universal Right to Refuge. Thank you very much. Please. You have 13 minutes. After that, I'll raise my finger for 2. There's another 2 minutes altogether, 15.
Thank you, Chair. Well, that was a tough act to follow. I don't know what I could say that would add any more value to the discussions here. But my presentation today is on a research that we at ActionAid India have taken the lead in coordinating. The preliminary title, as is displayed, is Women Speak, a Universal Right to Refuge. I would first like to talk about the context which compelled us to conceptualize this work. And this was the scale, magnitude of the Rohingya refugee influx into Bangladesh. That was the immediate context, obviously, but also the protracted nature of the conflict, of the genocide, I should say. That something like this has existed in our neighborhood for decades. And the Rohingyas being the most persecuted community in the world and not deserving the attention on the international stage that they deserve. The second thing was also the statements that were in the immediate context since August 2017 made by some sections of the Indian government and the portrayal in the media of the Rohingya population. Mr. Tapan Bose had already alluded to some of that in his comments. You know, there was, we were, at least in the progressive civil society, quite distressed at the Indian government's inaction. And moreover, there were certain sections of the government that were in a deliberate or non-deliberate manner spreading misinformation. For example, our Minister of State for Home Affairs, he and some other officials of the government, you know, they termed Rohingyas who were present in India as illegal immigrants instead of calling them rightfully refugees. Then also the multiple global crises of mass displacements and refugee movements and migration under dire circumstances that we can see all around the globe today. That made us think about how it was a responsibility not only on state actors but also on non-state actors like human rights organizations to respond to these crises and to prioritize the human rights, the protection of human rights for women, men, and children. And the objectives of this research or this work that we have thought about is firstly to contribute to the public discourse of universal right to refuge through women's narratives. So the idea is to encourage and contribute to a public discourse on the universal right to refuge. Because in a lot of contexts, we find that people's perceptions and their reactions and the government's response is largely based on either the ethnic and religious persuasion of the refugee community that is seeking asylum, or it depends on the status of the host government's relations with the country of origin, or it depends on geopolitical considerations. But what we, in essence, are saying is that every human being, irrespective of religion, caste, race, ethnicity, gender, other such considerations, has a right to seek and be granted asylum under safe and dignified conditions. And through this research, we want to reinforce the point by sharing testimonies and stories of women who are present in different refugee contexts. The other objective is to capture the intergenerational costs of denial of asylum, of protection. Because when we deny women and children especially, the right to be protected and to gain asylum, we are adding to their vulnerabilities and the risks of exploitation. And yesterday there was a lot of talk here about guarding against the creation of a lost generation. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that if these people are not provided protection under international law, then it has very real implications, not only on their day-to-day life, but their futures and future generations of those communities. And the third objective was also to underline a shared and collective responsibility to protect. So we want to emphasize through this work that the responsibility to protect and to give asylum is not just the role of the neighboring country or the first country that these people are able to access, but it is, it is the collective responsibility, it is a shared responsibility of the international community. Now, some of the key features that we have included in our framework is looking at the stories of women asylum seekers, of women refugees, and also women members of the host community. Now, why this focus on women? Because we believe that the narratives of displaced women bring out the universality of loss out more starkly. Women, when we talk to them in refugee camps, they talk about the loss of their homes, of their culture, of their family members, the loss of their agency. And we find that that is a universal theme that we see in a lot of refugee contexts. And the second reason is also that we wanted to bring to the forefront the additional layer of disempowerment that women refugees have to face due to the entrenched structural inequalities that are already there and are usually amplified in cases of violence and displacement. The other key feature is a multiplicity of regions and contexts. So we didn't want to focus on one particular issue because that happens a lot when we talk about these refugee crises. It becomes about that one refugee community, about that one conflict, about that one crisis. But the point is that this is happening across the globe. There are protracted conflicts, there are protracted refugee crises with no resolution in sight. And we want to bring attention to that. And while we believe that no refugee story is monolithic or simplistic, there are multiplicity in stories, but we also find that there is usually a universal tale of persecution, of desperation, and the will to survive and flourish at the heart of each such story. The third thing that we really want to bring in is we want to establish channels of communication which narrate to the public these stories in a relatable way. So really creating a consciousness amongst the general public, because in a lot of contexts we find that the people's perception, the local population and the host community, their perception usually has an impact on how the government reacts and the amount of protection that a government provides to a refugee population. And it definitely has a bearing on upholding the rights of refugees and on empowering them, because how they interact with the local population will obviously have an impact on how they, how much freedom of movement, of work, for example, they will have. So we really want to create channels of dialogue and communication with people here. And in this process, we also want to document people's perceptions and motivations to be empathetic or apathetic to displaced persons. So in Bangladesh's case, for example, we heard yesterday that the first responders in the crisis were the local community. So what impelled the local host community to respond positively to these people? And in certain other cases, what are the factors that keep local communities from responding in such a hospitable manner? Coming to the methodology now, I won't delve really into the details because a lot of this you will find is very similar to what Professor Imtiaz was talking about when he talked about micro-narratives. And here I have to acknowledge him because it was his excellent book, people on many rivers, which really helped us, distill and finalize this methodology. So whatever he said about the need for subjectivity, for being a good listener when you collect these stories, and for guarding against the issues of translation, all of that applies. What we are trying to do is that we're looking at narrations of women which are broadly categorized around the immediate aftermath of displacement. So what are the violations of rights? What is the kind of need for protection in that situation of the breakout of violence and the displacement that it causes? The second cluster, so to say, is around the rights and agency of women as asylum seekers and refugees in host countries. So what is the level to which they are able to access the basic services that they're entitled to in host countries, the access to justice, access to psychosocial services, and access to services that will help them get empowered. And the third cluster is looking at voluntary return and safety and dignity and protected return, as well as the rehabilitation and reintegration upon return, because often we find that our discourse ends at the demand for return or repatriation. But what happens when these communities go back or are resettled in third countries? Are they getting the required services? Are they getting the required support that they need to rebuild their lives? The methodology which we are using to do so is termed as, it comes from psychology, it's interpretative phenomenological analysis. It's a mouthful, so I'm going to refer to it as IPA. So the IPA talks about how research should make sense, should help people make sense of their own personal experiences. So it focuses on people's interpretations of their circumstances and their reactions. And what it entails is a broad research question. So it's, as Professor Imtiaz was mentioning, that it doesn't really go into a questionnaire or a survey, but it's more about broad research questions that prompt the respondents to share their experiences in detail, and while they're in the process of talking about processing what happened to them, about narrating it to somebody, it attempts to understand, to help them understand that personal experience and whatever they've gone through. And in this, the researcher is not treating the respondent as a subject, but they are an active participant who are participating in that process of inquiry and understanding. IPA also adopts an incremental approach. So the researcher, all right, okay, I'll hurry up. So the researcher looks at the one case, it's on a case-to-case basis. So you're taking sort of a deep dive into the personal stories and experiences of each person instead of trying to survey people very quickly. Then these stories are basically clustered and interpreted the way that Professor Imtiaz was mentioning is done in the case of micronarratives. Finally, I would like to say that in any research, and in this research as well, the underlying attempt is to represent the experiences of refugee women as honestly and as empathetically as we can. And we're not trying to prove a particular hypothesis or any preconceived notions, or to privilege certain stories over other stories. But obviously, when you undertake work of this kind, you have certain expectations attached. And with this research and any other such research, I think the idea is to explore the following themes. Which is on displacement. We really want to talk about the suddenness of loss and displacement, because there's this whole narrative that's being created about how these populations are people who have planned to move into another country for jobs and for security because they were denied these things in their origin countries. But we want to talk about how, for example, Mr. Tunkin was saying, they didn't have time, they've left their land, they have left their homes, they didn't have any personal belongings when they moved, because those are the circumstances in which they have to take these very difficult decisions to leave. We also want to look at the absence of policies and actions to protect women and children specifically, because most protection frameworks, talk about refugee communities as a whole. And there is a need to acknowledge and to create policies which specifically talk about the protection of women and children. And we also would like to explore the social and cultural isolation that women who are in refugee contexts face, because in a lot of these contexts, and also we have found this in the camps with the Rohingya population, is although the men sometimes may know Bengali or English even, or they have a language to communicate in, the women don't even have that much. So there is this whole isolation that is accompanied in a life as a refugee, and we would really like to explore that from a women's eye. In asylum, we would also like to look at the threats to safety and dignity of women, and we would also really like to be able to collect stories for these women about how the childhood of their children has been disrupted. And it's almost like the hopes for those children don't exist, because I remember one of the most striking things. All right, can I just take 30 seconds to wrap up? 30 seconds. Yes. So one of the most striking things in the camps that we witnessed was when we talked to these young girls about their hopes and aspirations, they didn't know what to say because they've not had the luxury to think about that far in the future, So those are the stories that we want to bring out. And we also want to not only focus on this aspect, but also look at the self-reliance and the coping mechanisms that these women have developed for themselves, whether it's social, economic, cultural, mechanisms. And on repatriation specifically, we want to talk about the hopes and fears of going back home, the challenges that they face in starting their lives anew, and then also bring in the case of stateless people. Where do they go? And then we just, okay, all right. So that's the idea, and the point is of creating a piece of work that talks about the women. And any such research, I think, should look at this as, stories of women, their lives, their evidence of what has happened, and their voice. So I would like to end there. Thank you.
Sorry, your topic was Women Speak, so we gave you extra 30 seconds. Thank you very much. We now have with us Professor Dr. Mohsin Habib, who is a senior lecturer and involved with international business studies as director in the international business in the university, in an Australian university. Sir, you have not 15 minutes, you have 10 minutes. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. We have given way to our previous speakers. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm actually thinking that I've lost both the depth and the breadth today, because Professor, Imtiaz and Dr. Bose and other speakers, they talked everything, and I'm kind of thinking what I'm going to talk. Let me take you through a couple of issues and how we've come together, international team for a project, and the context of the project and what we are doing. So feel free to look at the slide, because I've spent time to made it last night. So please do. The picture you're saying, I can tell you that that has quite a significance to me. 17 years of my academic career, and before that about 7, 8 years with UNDP, I have not come across to any atrocities at this level. I was there. This is Shahpuri Deep between Teknaf and, in Bangladesh, it was in south. In October, I was there for another project, and I happened to see some, cows and goats and, and some chickens walking around and some people. So it's a transit area. And I had an extensive consultation with the local leaders, chairmen. I have talked with a lot of people. And in one night, I was talking to some local chairmen and leaders of political parties. One particular chairman was telling me, do you want a Rohingya kid or a woman? It will just cost you 20,000 taka. I don't know what you feel. I mean, Australia has a very bad reputation about refugees, how we are dealing with refugees in the country. But, you know, I could not comprehend that. And I was too traumatized after I left Bangladesh. I had nightmares. I had nightmares. And that is how, you know, that all started. And then we thought of, you know, coming up with something. And everything, whatever we intend to do most of the work has been done at this moment. You know, is sort of going to address a lot of the questions raised in this conference. It is, unfortunately, I don't have anything to share at this point. In a month time, probably I should be able to share. So I think this is quite well known to the world, where Bangladesh and Myanmar sits. You know, there were like 3.2 million Rohingyas, you know, in Arakan, in Rakhine, and there were 1 million at one point, and then this is where it is. Now, Bangladesh has, you know, hosting about 1.2 million. Saudi Arabia has the largest population of 500,000. Australia has got about 6,000 that I know of. So this is where Rohingyas' population is. I just want everyone to look at these slides, because what I looked at, the historical documentation and the timeline of even the history of repeated crises, what the previous speaker talked very well on what I did, I actually color-coded them, red and green. And what it represents, different timeline from, you know, 1948 to the recent time. And what is interesting to see that every time Rohingyas were needed to vote, that is when they have been given some access, a card or some sort of an, you know, so are they really just a number? Are they really just a number? If that is the case, then this is the fate of a community going to wipe out. That's what it is, because they've been treated just as a number. And there's a significant, you know, historical, political, and economic state of persecution that took place. You know, we all know. And what we read is unbelievable. That, you know, there's evidence of Nazi ideologies in official Arakan National Party documents. And you can see one of this picture, you know, defenders of the fatherland. So that is showing, you know, what the architects of genocide that's happening. You know, it's a significant degree of coordination between state officials, security forces, Rakhine nationalists, civil society, you know, and Buddhist monks. And this significant degree of coordination has actually delivered these recent you know, atrocities. I was shocked to find out, you know, in 1988, SPDC adopted a Rohingya extermination plan. And there's like 11 points where we saw, you know, number one, the Muslim Rohingyas are not to be provided with citizenship card by identifying them as insurgent. Number two, to reduce the population growth Rohingyas by gradual imposition of restriction on their marriage. This is exactly what you're saying. This was 1988, right? To strive of increase Buddhist population to be more than the number of Muslims. That's what probably, I don't know how successful they were. Looking at number 5, to forbid higher education. And I have met at least 200 to 300 Rohingyas in Melbourne, in Australia. And I have talked with, you know, Rohingya leaders in the community. It was difficult for me to get someone who can speak, you know, very well to talk about, in English, to talk about their stories, their life in front of the minister just, you know, last month, I can tell you. Number 6, no Muslim is to be appointed in government services. 7, to forbid them from ownership of land, shops, buildings, any such properties under their existing ownership must be confiscated for distribution among the Buddhists. That's shocking. Then you look at a ban of construction, renovation of mosque and every other facilities. Let's look at number 10. Whenever there is a case between Rakhine and Muslim, the court shall give verdict in favor of Rakhine. When the case is between Muslim themselves, the court shall favor the rich against the poor Muslim so that the latter leaves the country with frustration. You see what degree of plan is happening. The last one is much more shocking. They could not just be more patient. That's what they did. Mass killing of Muslim to be avoided in order not to invite attention from the Muslim countries. Did you see that? They just could not hold their patience, isn't it? Citizenship issue, color-coded citizenship. You know, there were like 797, 500 white card issued, and majority, vast majority, 666,000 plus were Muslim. Then that let me, understand how we can contextualize Daniel's delineation of genocide. There are like 6-stage process. You look at, first one is stigmatization, where the construction of negative otherness through dehumanization, scapegoating, including denial of citizenship. That has taken place, proved. I shouldn't say that proved in social science, in research in social science, but that is true. Number 2, harassment, violence, and terror. Physical and psychological harassment, violence, arbitrary arrests, detention, deprivation of all other human rights. Number 3, look at isolation and segregation. Forced demarcation of separate and isolate social, geographical, economic, political, cultural on this space. Systematic weakening of their social process, extermination, that what took place in August, and then the last one remains, and it is probably they're working on when the bulldozer going on over the burned villages. The reconstruction of a new society in which the victims of genocide are physically and symbolically gone. They are doing it. And this is, I mean, we got a researcher with us, his specialty is geospatial data, map analysis. So we have got these from, he got that somewhere, of course, from satellite mapping. These are the red dots are, burned villages. And this is satellite picture taken during that time. So Butidong, there were a number of settlement affected, 34. Mongdu was 225, Ratradong is 16. And this is another picture of that disaster. And this is the daily sum of fire detected by the satellite, from 25th of August till the September. And that is shocking. And everyone knows the number of Rohingya flows here. So it's 1.1 million Rohingyas live in a place slightly bigger than Dhaka airport, or if I say slightly bigger than Melbourne CBD, Central Business District. This is concern for Bangladesh. What are the concerns? I think Topan Bosch talked about that in depth. I'll just go through that, sweep through that. Looking at 1.5 billion per year for 30 years. This money going to the Chinese government as well as the armies. Looking at, that's 40% of Myanmar's income, the gas project. This one, the Indian Kaladan transport project. India's invested about US 214 million transport project to connect India and northern part with Kolkata. So this is concern from Bangladesh. Should not be concerned, but it's happening to be. Other concern, as monsoon season is coming, floodplain, landslide, and there are maps here. So this is going to raise significant issues in the few days or a month. Looking at deforestation, environmental disaster, that's been well talked about even yesterday. Another concern, are we trying to convert them to become Bangladeshi or Bengali? Because when I was there, I took this picture. There are like 2,000 mosques there. I have no concern about it. And their mosques turned to, that's the only facilities, education facilities they got. These are madrasas, and they're learning Bengalis. And there is a concern, looking at other concern, the impact on the local community. The host community fatigue is going to be exploding sometime very soon. And I had a significant consultation with them, and in various levels, and this picture is taken from the UNO office in Ukhia, UNO office. And this is a group, they're trying to raise concern. There were processions against Rohingya, refugees. So the same people, you see, the dilemma here is the same people, they help them out when they arrive. The same people, they're sort of standing, together against Rohingyas, their concerns. The same people, they help them out. There's another party of, yes, another group of people selling off human being, 20,000 taka, right. This is the project I was talking about, rehabilitation, resettlement, and repatriation. I'm not talking about sending them back force, but this is the project. So we got 4 researchers from 4 different universities, from Australia, Canada, and Norway. We got a government department in Australia. We got Ontario International Development Agency and some other national NGOs and working together. So we have got 3,300 household level interviews, and still working on that. So these are the objectives. So you know why we're doing this. We're trying to look at the experience of Rohingya people before they came here, explore the experience of large sample people in the makeshift camp, and the extent of assistance they have received from various agencies. This is the other thing we are to look at, the life of vocational skill set. What sort of skill set they've got, their socio-economic political lives of Rohingya ethnic minority in Myanmar, under what conditions they would like to go back. Then calculation of some sort of a economic and social cost of displaced Rohingyas, compensation modeling, that's what we are working on. Explore whether, if so, how Rohingya could contribute to Bangladesh community. They're not going, we're not sending them back very soon. The last one is how the culture and language of Rohingya people can be maintained, other than converting them to become Bengalis. That's quite an significant, important issue, because we should not let a whole culture wipes off from the map of the world. Thank you very much. I welcome any questions. I was on time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohsen. It's a great honor knowing that you have spent so much time last night preparing this piece, and I'm afraid I had to cut you short and not give you sufficient time. Well, we're really running against time, so I've decided that we can have, because we had 1, 2, 3, 4 persons who have given their views, so I'm giving time for 4 questions, 1 for each person. I'm doing all of this because, unfortunately, I have to go back soon, because I've got a class, I have to take a class as professor in the independent university, and that's about 10 miles from here. And IUB, to traverse the roads of Dhaka because of traffic problems, means at least an hour and a half. I don't know if the lady on the left will agree on that, but ActionAid is ActionAid, and we have no action with regard to traffic management. So we'll have 4 questions, and after that I'll give my concluding part of about 6 minutes. But we have 5 minutes for 4 questions. Anyone willing to ask a question will please identify the person they want to ask the question from. And the answer will be within 1 minute. Yes, please.
Sir, my name is Mohammad Abdul Hai. I am a student of economics and teaching also. My question is to Mr. Tun Khin. Really, sir, we feel your pains, sufferings as a whole of your country, as we also fought for our liberation in 71 as a freedom fighter. My question is, will the international community, including the UN and international bodies and EU, continue to remain an active or proactive and take up or pressure up the Rohingya issue of ethnic cleansing in line with international and legal instruments, and how long? And as you are living in the abroad, what you are doing to raise your issue in the international communities? Can I ask you one more question, sir? No? Oh, thank you, sir.
Especially as a Rohingya group, we are advocating to, firstly, now we are calling to ICC referral to Burmese military who have perpetrated mass atrocities against Rohingya. That is one, for the justice and accountability we trying, and also, as mentioned, you know, unfortunately, UN Special Rapporteur, UN High Commissioner already have mentioned quite clearly. Unfortunately, I mean, the governments are not really taking action. So we can see that more need to be done from international community. And EU, recently they targeted some sanctions, but for me that at least some action are good, but it's not really effective. Effective is what the military, they worry is for their lives as ICCs and others. And on top of that, as a Rohingya, what we can see is we need to look at how we can protect our people, whether Bangladesh or in Burma. Of course, everybody wants to return, but we need protection. That's why we are trying our best to get support from international community, protected homeland of Myanmar, because without protection, UN or any other way, we cannot live in Burma. That is the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We now have 3 others. Any other question for, yes, please. No comment, just a question.
Thank you, Chair. How to create a Rohingyas human rights defender for promoting and protect the rights of the Rohingyas people in Rakhine state, and how to create a recovery within their society. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Imtiaz sir, Dr. Imtiaz sir.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not being harsh, but I still remember when I was chairman of G77 for the whole of Europe, when I was ambassador in Brussels, I used to do exactly the same thing with 123 countries. So I'm afraid I'm repeating myself in this context. Professor,
this would be an exercise in revisiting diplomacy. And we can have a session on that. We can have a session on that. Anyway, very quickly, there have been talk about different scenarios. The Chinese talk about a non-attributed zone in Bangladesh-Myanmar-China border. Quote unquote, and which I have no sense of what it means. There have been safe zone. Our Prime Minister has made reference to safe zone, if you remember her speech in the General Assembly. So there have been certain, there have been certain movements on that. But I think Tun Khin has made it very clear, and I believe our Dhaka declaration will also have something very clear on that, that whatever is done in repatriation this time, there has to be protection, protected, guaranteed. Not not like earlier times. I think this is the difference, because as I was mentioning or some of us mentioned that this time it's different because in the 70s and 90s we did not have evidence of mass killing or, whatever word you're using, genocide or ethnic cleansing, a crime against humanity. This time there's enough evidence, and if that is and since that is the case, not to have protection inbuilt would not work. So, point I believe, whether we talk about a safe zone or non-attributable safe zone, whatever term we are using, I think it is clear that this time the repatriation process needs to have protection inbuilt in that understanding.
Thank you very much. Third question. But I don't see anyone's hands up.
Lovely.
So obviously there is no fourth question. So, yes, please.
Divita, women speak, which is a very difficult task because women are not at the table and they are not invited to speak, whether it is a cultural practice or it is an institute, so structural. So since we have launched on this initiative, and it would be important to back it up, this is not a question, more of a suggestion, that we do the documentary and we also invite women. Are you thinking of inviting women documentary experts, filmmakers to back it up, to also make it visual? And yesterday in our conversation we talked about how the women's movement in our country, in Bangladesh, is not really in alignment or active. So should we think about global women's movement taking this up?
Thanks for the suggestion, Farah. Yeah, I think as I was mentioning in the presentation that we want to make it a popular piece of work, so it is for popular consumption. It's not, it could be used as an advocacy piece, but it's not just that. It's much, much more, right? It's the stories and the experiences of these women. And I think the best way to make it that accessible is through visual pieces. So we would definitely want to do photos of the kind that we've seen, the excellent exhibition that's outside. It speaks so much to people. And if we could do videos of that kind also, it would be excellent. It obviously depends on the comfort level of these women. And we have to be cognizant of all those issues. And definitely I think that women movements, not only in Bangladesh but also in India, we have a very vibrant women's movement, but we have not connected with this because we have this sense across movements of thinking in very like status quoist and silos, like this is not a women's issue, it's a refugee issue. But it is a women's issue. So the women's movement definitely across the globe should take it up.
Thank you very much. In this context, may I just add one small point? Al Jazeera has been for the last 2 weeks carrying a piece on their webpage, 100 Faces of the Rohingya Crisis. I don't know if you have all seen that. It's mesmerizing. It's with photographs and all the various aspects pertaining to the Rohingya situation. I would strongly recommend that all of you should try to access to that situation. I'm afraid I can't have the fourth question now because we have run out of time. So I'll just give a short synopsis, but before I start that, I've been requested by the media here that I should speak for about 1.5 minutes in Bangla so that it can be carried by the television stations which are having the news in Bangla. আপনাদের সবাইকে অপরাহ্নের শুভেচ্ছা আর আপনাদের সবাইকে এখানে আসার জন্য ধন্যবাদ। বিশেষ করে আমি যখন আজকে শুনছিলাম এবং তাতে আমি বলবো যে ব্র্যাককে এবং সেন্টার ফর জেনোসাইড স্টাডিজ আর অ্যাকশনএডকে আমি বিশেষভাবে ধন্যবাদ দিচ্ছি। তারা এই অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ পদক্ষেপ নিয়ে আজকে এই আলোচনার আয়োজন করেছেন, গতকালও করেছেন, এবং আজকে ঢাকা ডিক্লারেশন বলে একটা সেশন হবে, সেইটাতে আমি আশা করছি অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ একটা সিদ্ধান্ত নেওয়া হবে। আমি এই কারণে বলছি, কারণ কিছুদিনের মধ্যে আগামী সপ্তাহে আমাকে যেতে হবে। আমি কমিশনার হিসেবে ওআইসি হিউম্যান রাইটস কমিশনের আমাদের সৌদি আরবিয়া মিটিং হচ্ছে, সেখানে একটা রোহিঙ্গাদের উপরে রিপোর্ট তৈরি হচ্ছে, সেখানে ঢাকা ডিক্লারেশন যেটা আপনারা বের করবেন সেটা আমি প্রতিফলন করার চেষ্টা করব, যাতে করে 57টা দেশে এইটা আঙ্গিক রূপ পায়, সবাই দেখতে পায়, সবাই জানতে পায়, এবং আপনাদের 3টে ইনস্টিটিউশন তাতে সবাই গোচরে আসবে। আমি আজকে এইটা বলে একটু ইংলিশে আমি যাচ্ছি, আই এম গোয়িং ব্যাক টু ইংলিশ সো দ্যাট this can be noted. I still remember Aeropagetica, which was an essay written by John Milton, where he said, non scholae sed vitae decimus, which was in Latin. And it was, discussion is knowledge in the making. And what we have had today is really an example of that. Now in this context, I'm just recalling that my first association with the Rohingya problem was in 1977, and that was due to my old friend Kofi Annan, whom I got to know in August 1972, because he and Sergio Vieira de Mello, because I was then at that time with Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. He was the chairman of the Repatriation Commission which was formed, and I was the secretary of that commission. We were working together to arrange for the safe repatriation of more than 10.36 million people of Bangladeshi origin who had fled Bangladesh during the liberation war in 1971, and they were returning back to Bangladesh from various parts of India. There were about 33.2 thousand people who had also gone to Myanmar. Now they all came back, and along with that we arranged the repatriation of about 237,000 people of Bangladeshi origin who had been kept in camps in Pakistan. And from here, we had about 439,000 people of Bihari origin, of whom about 277,000 were sent back to Pakistan. Now, in the context of our discussion today, we have noticed certain very seriously important points. One is that Myanmar is not only denying the existence of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but also of the two covenants, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and also the Covenant on Economic and Social Rights. Now, these are important because when you discard these covenants, you end up creating a situation which can lead to ethnic cleansing, and which can lead to subsequently to genocide. Now, I remember that when the Dayton Peace Agreement was signed on Bosnia, there were 5 of us who drafted that. General Clark, Madeleine Albright, myself, and 2 other persons, Nick Burns, and also another person from the Bosnian side, Haris Silabic. And later on, I was ambassador to Bosnia, and I helped to start the war crimes trial against Serbia when I went on to Brussels. Now, what we are noticing today in Myanmar is not only gross ethnic cleansing and an example of genocide, but we are also noticing that the world, as expected, the developed world, as expected, are very clear in their denunciation of what's happening in Myanmar, but whatever they say, they do not put it into action. They don't walk the mile. We have seen, similarly, that other interests, like trade, potential use of hydrocarbons, the question of connectivity, the question of strategic importance, geostrategic paradigm, that is playing an important role. And that is one of the reasons why I remember in December, I was invited by Xi Jinping to go to China to have a discussion on various issues regarding the One Belt, One Road initiative. And I had a meeting with him, and also had a meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi. And in that meeting, I pointed out that while he talks of One Belt, One Road initiative and connectivity, I pointed out to a proverb of a lady called Khona, who came from Sri Lanka and settled in what is now West Bengal in India. She died there. And she said something very interesting. She said, if you take a bowl of milk and you have a bit of dirt which falls in the milk, then the whole milk gets spoiled. এক গামলা দুধে এক ফোঁটা চোনা পড়লে পুরো দুধ নষ্ট হয়ে যায়। So I told Mr. Xi Jinping that you're talking of connectivity, but you're forgetting that what is happening in the Rakhine state is creating, by its own method, through a strategic reason, the creation of vulnerability and potential terrorism. And this cannot help connectivity. So please remove that stain, otherwise you will not have connectivity. And subsequently, the Chinese sent a minister to Bangladesh to discuss this. And we have also had our foreign minister who visited yesterday and had meeting with Mr. Lavrov. And there's another reason for that, because as you probably know of this case of the alleged poisoning through the use of chemicals of 2 Russian spies in Salisbury, a spy and his daughter. It so happens that the Bangladesh ambassador in Netherlands is the chairman of the executive council of the Organization Against Chemical Weapons. So the Bangladesh ambassador is topically in charge of this investigation as to whether chemicals were used in this attack on these 2 spies. Now that's different, but as far as the Rohingya issue is concerned, I'm hoping that all the beautiful things which we have heard today, which we have heard yesterday, and which we'll hear by the end of the session today, will be uplinked into a common platform, and then it should be circulated by the Center for Genocide, ActionAid and BRAC to all our Bangladeshi embassies abroad, so that they know that this is the web portal where you can get all the information and you can get all the facts. And it should similarly be circulated to all the universities by the non-state actors who are associated with this whole prospect, not only in Bangladesh, both private and public, but all over South Asia. And also, if possible, in the contiguous areas, which includes Cambodia, who voted against us in the UN General Assembly, Myanmar, all the others, Philippines, Vietnam. We have had the visit of the Vietnam president, we have had the visit of the Cambodian and everyone else, but they need to see what's happening. So when this organization jointly puts it up in the web portal and passes it on to them, it will have its own effect. This is just my suggestion. Well, I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having had the patience to listen. I had a lot of points, but I decided I should follow my own timing as well. So I'm cutting my thing short. And many thanks for being here, for participating. And I look forward, Professor Imtiaz, to receiving all these details and the Dhaka declaration. I can share it with all the 57 foreign ministers in Jeddah. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we're breaking for lunch for an hour, and lunch is served downstairs in the dining hall. Please use exit on your right to go to the dining hall directly. Thank you. We'll be back within 1 hour. আমরা 1 ঘন্টার জন্য মধ্যাহ্নভোজের বিরতিতে যাচ্ছি। আপনার ডান পাশের এক্সিটটি ব্যবহার করুন ডাইনিং হলে যাওয়ার জন্য গ্রাউন্ড ফ্লোরে। থ্যাংক ইউ।
This is a common distribution point of Balukhali 2 camp, and we are covering more than 125,000 people. Today actually we are distributing dignity kit and blanket, and as you have seen, we got more than 4,000 people who came here to receive this item. We have included sanitary napkin, underwear, clothes, their outfit to help them face the situation. We are also distributing blanket because this is winter season in here.
Today, we have Burma. We have Guli Mari Mari Valaya, Radashima, Baurati, Dashtiva, Valeri. Tuna, Tuna, Vaya, the Kushilagi, Shandari, Vindium, Vindiva, Amator, Vindium, Lady. The Batti the Lagivo. Gorbar है तो गोज़े को बोल रहे हैं अब ताबला तक आना है मगर गुली मारे हारे तो क्या कहते हैं मुरा बात सुन गुली शिबिरे गुली तो आवाज़ मारे है आवाज़ मारे है आवाज़ तो गुली है मुरी जो है बाइडी हम बायो कबोनो कबोनी तो हमारा सांसद में तेरे तीन जल्दी आशा मशहूर है जो मेरे जल्दी तीन जल्दी आशा सावन की लो हो दूँगा उसल दूँ तो ताई ताई भी दूँ तो शंका की दूँ हम बोल दूँगा खाई बाती वाल लाइन नाई सर नाई बाती वाल मारे यार बात तक खाएंगे तो बाल्टी हम लोग जो पानी ताले बजुंदे बाल्टी मानिस टाइम गुसला और माय मांग तो टाइम हाँ चलो गुसला यहाँ लागे जिनिशन है तो बहुत कुछ ऐसे टाइम तो लोग तो बड़े
As women and girls are the most vulnerable victims of this humanitarian crisis, we are providing support to them, and with these dignity kits, the women and girls will be able to make the best use of it to protect their dignity. We believe this support will lessen their sufferings,
and we hope to continue this support. More than 1 million people are here who came from Rakhine State, and they are facing crisis every day, and the population is growing day by day. So there will be more need of such items.